Hello, how are you, Abe?
Fine, Baruch Hashem. How are you?
Good.
You all recovered?
Yeah,
Okay. So
you
what
feel
happened?
you're feeling all right? You still have the
Yeah,
black under the
yeah,
eye.
a little better. A little better. I'm healed. Where are we at?
Page 180.
180.
Lice,
Hi, Jacob, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, fine. How are you?
Good. How was your Pesach?
Very nice, enjoyable. How about you?
Very good.
Were you in
Oh,
Toronto, Jacob?
No, I was in LA,
Oh,
strangely enough. It's all good. How about you?
we were here. We were in LA.
Very good. Oh,
At least you missed the snowstorm.
what the hell is? Hmm. Hello.
hey, Walter,
Hi, where's Ernie?
Hi, Walter.
Hi,
you're missing an action.
missing action. What page are we on now, brother?
180.
Okay, thank you.
It's over a month that we had it last year. Hmm. Mhm. Yeah,
Good evening, everybody.
me? page 180.
Okay. We're dealing with animals on Shabbos. Although killing most living creatures is prohibited on Shabbos, the Gemara Masechta Shabbos quotes a fascinating dispute regarding killing lice. According to the Gemara, although lice are certainly living creatures, they do not reproduce. The Rambam explained that they're spontaneously generated from sweat. The Tanaim dispute whether taking the life of such a creature is prohibited on Shabbos. Rabbi Yezer Oimer, Ahoire kina b'Shabbos, kohere gamel b'Shabbos. If you kill a lice, it's like killing a camel. It's a regular animal. Ad kam lo pri Rabban Rabbi Lezer el b'kina. Chachamim argued regarding a louse. The eno prey v'reveh doesn't reproduce. Aval shar shkotzim ramoshim deparin v'ravim lo pligi. Other insects and other things that creep and crawl that reproduce, you would be chayiv for killing them. Ushneim lo amdula me'elim. That both Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim learned this from, you're not allowed to kill an aisle. An aisle, the hide of an aisle was used as the walls of the Mishkan. Eliezer sover ka'aylim, ma aylim sheyesh ben netilas neshama. When you kill a ram, you've killed an animal. Av kol sheyesh bo netilas neshama. Rabbanan sover ka'aylim, ma aylim depart v'ravim, but it has to reproduce like a ram. Av kol deprei revei. The Gemara elsewhere related that several Amoraim would follow the lenient for the Chachamim and would kill lice on Shabbos. And it was the sheet of Beis Hillel. Rabba maktaluhu. Rabba would kill them. Rosh Hashanah is also maktaluhu. Rabba shadule lekana demaya. He would throw them into a cup of water. Amar Rav Nachman lebante. Rav Nachman would say to his daughters, Katluna, you can kill them. Vashmin li kala desan v'si. That means when you comb your hair and the lice are found on the comb, then they can be killed there. Tanya Reb Shimon ben Elazar Oimer, ein organis amakolos b'Shabbos. You may not kill lice on Shabbos. Divrei Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel matirim. Beis Hillel allows it. The Rishonim agree that killing lice is permitted on Shabbos, and this is codified in the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says, "Kane muter laharga." However, we know today that lice reproduce, lay eggs. I think we learned this.
No,
Yeah, I think we learned this.
We learned this. We're on page 189.
Yeah, we learned this, Mario.
so I must have missed. I'm sorry.
189.
I'm sorry.
We're on 189.
We also talked about Mukezeh.
Right.
Right, we're in the sugi of Mukezeh.
We're on page 189.
Living animal.
Let's do 188. Let's just go back a little bit, 188, because it's an important Igros Moshe. Both Tosos and the Rosh conclude that even birds that have a use on Shabbos are Mukezeh. Chazal didn't make any differentiation. They said that animals are Mukezeh. However, in recent generations, when it's become common to own pets for the purpose of enjoyment, some poskim have suggested that Chazal's assumption is not entirely applicable, that they're Mukezeh. For example, Rav Moshe ruled that such pets are not included in Chazal's definition of Mukezeh and may be moved on Shabbos. It's an important tshuva that he wrote. Ziporim ktanim shemetzaftzefim, canaries that chirp, uktanim mesachaki bimam, and the children play with them. Hayim dino kemuktzeh, is it muktzeh? The Betosus Shabbos, hachi hitir arav Rabbeinu Yosef l'taltal efrochai, the chazi l'sachik botinok. There they said you could move a chick that's alive because children play with it. Rav Moshe answered, Kol balei chayim havalei muktzeh. Animals are muktzah. Afilu ba'oisin shatinokas pesachkin behen. Ela im kain hem miyuchadim l'shashuim, pets. If they're designated for pets, then you can be lenient. Let's see the footnote. The last clause appears in small print in the actual tshuva to indicate that it was added by the editor. That tshuva was from volume 8, which was published after Rav Moshe died. It should be noted that the original tshuva was written to Rav Pinchas Bodner, and it was published in Rav Bodner's work, The Laws of Mukezeh. This tshuva does not contain this line concerning pets. Moreover, it appears Rav Bodner himself understood Rav Feinstein to maintain that even pets are mukezeh. That's how Rav Bodner rules, that pets are mukezeh, and cites Rav Feinstein's ruling as a source. However, Rav Shabtai Rappaport, the editor of volumes 6 through 9 of Igros Moshe, has confirmed that he was instructed by Rav Feinstein himself to add this clause of unless they are pets, right? When it was later published in volume 8. Rav Shlomo Zalman agreed with Rav Moshe. Siporim v'chadome, or klovim, or dogs of anoshim, eile shemavalim zmanim lahevel v'rig. Now, he says that people who waste their time on this, regilin l'sachik behem, they play with them. Kivin shetashmisham uletiltul mimokum l'mokum shapir shari. Part of using pets is to move them from place to place. So, ein zem muktzeh. He says they're not muktzeh. Rav Auerbach appears to frown on the idea of owning a dog. And for discussions on the halachic propriety of owning a pet, there's some sources here of Chaim Jachter, who of course we know, halachic perspective on pets in the journal. You have Rav Nassim Slifkin. The Pnei Halacha also comments on it. There are comments about the potential health benefits of owning a pet. Perhaps it can help your blood pressure. Rav Shlomo Zalman, in his earlier comments on this subject that are brought in Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasa, does not explicitly rule that pets are not muktzeh as a fundamental principle, but merely entertains the possibility that a fish tank is not muktzeh when displayed for decorative purposes in the home. His lenient ruling concerning pets appear in Shulchan Shlomo, which was published later. Perhaps Rav Auerbach and Rav Feinstein only addressed the issue of pets directly in later years, when it became more common for Jews to own a pet, right, in sections of the religious Jewish community, which we mentioned a number of times. I remember clearly Rabbi Gruman, our Rebbeim, no one had pets. The rabbis didn't have pets primarily, but that's changed. That's changed as time has gone on. Now,
it depends. Yeah. It depends where you grew up.
It depends where. Yeah, obviously. You tell me in South Africa, it was very common. Everybody had a pet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, there were people who had pets.
And in the Lower East Side, nobody had a pet.
Exactly.
I can tell you.
No, it was. It's still frown when I see the Hasidim see me. They frown upon it. It's like forget it. Especially
they didn't grow up with it. They didn't grow up seeing it.
Right.
Walter, the rabbi who lives next to you in Alta Vista.
He had a pet. He had a pet, yeah. Rabbi Rottenberg. Yeah. And we're talking about 50 years ago, Rabbi Rottenberg.
And he was a Hasidic Rebbe with a
Hasidic Rebbe, and he walked around with the dog on Shabbos.
I remember that.
It was my neighbor, and they had no problem with it. People frowned upon him too, but it's okay. But he was a big Tom Chochem, and he had no problem.
Right, but I mean, like growing up, Rabbi Adler, Rabbi Dolgin, the rabbis I knew, Rabbi Ginsburg, Rabbi God, the rabbis, they didn't have pets. There was no pets.
No.
Alberstam, there were no pets.
I know.
But that's a time, because that was probably the practice in Europe. But in other societies, it became more common. So Rav Yitzchak Yosef, he says it's muktzah. Klovim ktanim, small dogs, even though they are set aside to play with. The Hilchos Shabbos also rules like that. Like sticks and stones. They're not prepared to be used for Shabbos. Therefore, now he's saying this is not just cows and sheep, but even animals that people grow up in their homes with. Pick them up. You shouldn't pick up a dog or a cat or a frog or a turtle or frochim, little chicks. And you shouldn't move a cage that has canaries in it. May one pet one's dog or other pet on Shabbos. According to the poskim that all pets are not muktzah, it's certainly permissible to pet a dog. According to the poskim that all pets are muktzah, the answer is not entirely clear. Remember, the inyanim of muktzah we're going to see as we learn more and more of the sugya is to move a kli. It's not just to touch it. Many people, don't touch it. No. Muktzah is moving it. And that's what they're going to get into here. Because when you pet it, you're not necessarily moving it. You're just touching it. We'll learn later in the volume that it's permissible to touch a muktzah object on Shabbos. Now, you have to keep in mind that petting a dog or cat will often cause it to move, which may be equivalent to moving muktzah, which moving muktzah is forbidden. On the other hand, the Shulchan Aruch rules that one may not move even one limb of an animal that is muktzah. If they're in a chotzer, you can help them walk. You can grab them by the neck if the animals need it. Shouldn't pick them up. In arts to lift their feet from the ground. You can't move them. Rav Badner and many other poskim rule that if pets are muktzah, then one is prohibited from petting them. However, the Shulchan Aruch says you can wipe one's wet hands on a horse's tail. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Mishnes kalkala yadav betit. If his hands are dirty, mekancha biznav asus, you can clean it with the tail of a horse, biznav apara, v'mapa koshe, or shmata hausila lachos bakotsim. This would seem to be similar to petting. Some indeed infer from here that petting an animal is permitted, even if the animal is muktzah, provided one does not move the animal in the process. See the Bir Halacha, that's the Mishnah Berurah, who speculates that perhaps the hairs of the animal are not muktzah, even if the animal itself is muktzah. This position that petting an animal is permitted was taken and explained by students of Rav Asher Weiss on a website called Tvuna. The website's no longer accessible, but an archive page can be found at such and such and such and such. Okay. What about feeding animals? The Gemara discusses this question. Distinguishes between animals that one is responsible for and those for one which is not responsible. Gemara appears to permit providing food that is not readily available, even for animals for which one is not responsible. You can put food in front of a dog. Because the chazir gets his own food. The dog relies on his master for its food. The chazir doesn't rely on you for his food. You don't put water in front of bees with the yonim shebesholach or birds in a birdhouse. Aval noisin if they abzim if they turn a golim. You can do it in front of geese or chickens if they yoni ardosios. These are certain types of doves. Because the difference is these kind of birds rely on you, and the other birds get their own food. But why are you prohibiting water? Even you shouldn't allow anything. Water is available, so you don't have to do a lot of tircha to provide water. The Rambam omits the second distinction made by the Gemara and rules in accordance with Rav Ashi's initial interpretation that one may only feed animals for which one is responsible for on Shabbos. But Rabbi Mishma is also allowed to go on behemto, his animal. Birds that live in the house. The avzim v'tarnagolim, geese and chickens. Avamisha ein mizonosav olav. Go on chazir, v'yoni shavach udvarim lo yitin lifneim lo mozav lo mayim. The Ran expresses astonishment at the Rambam's omission of the leniency to feed food such as wheat and barley, which is not readily available, even to animals one is not responsible for. We made a distinction between water, even grain that's not available. You could give it to the birds in a birdhouse, even though you're not necessarily responsible for their food. He's surprised at the Rambam. Hilchos Shabbos. You shouldn't give them food or drink. The Rif. The Ran doesn't understand why they omitted this leniency. So the Beis Yosef writes that the Rif and the Rambam understood that the distinction made by the Gemara between readily available and non-readily available food is offered only as a possibility in order to reject the proof Rav Ashi brought from the Mishnah. The halacha, however, remains in accordance with Rav Ashi, and you may only feed animals one is responsible for on Shabbos. You don't feed a chazir because you're not responsible for him. Any kind of food. Kravashi disfir leachi. V'afagav di'itchilei di'yikud masnisan lo yitchidina. Even though the svara was pushed, not the din. You can't put any food in front of an animal where you're not responsible to feed. Rav Karo ruled the same way in the Shulchan Aruch. You don't give food or water to bees. Bees fly around and get their own food. Not doves that fly around. Chazir gets its own food. Geese and chickens, birds that live in the house. And dogs rely on the human being to feed it. Now, despite the stringent ruling of the Shulchan Aruch regarding like bees and birds, right? The Chazon Ish writes that since the more straightforward reading of the Gemara supports the more lenient view of the Ran, one who feeds food that is not readily available to any animal does not lose out. He suggests that the Rif and the Rambam may also agree to this, as if food is not readily available to an animal, everyone is responsible for the animal. Says the Chazon Ish. He says for no reason Beis Yosef pushed them aside, because Nira, the Gam Das Harif Rambam came, that they would agree. That's only, that's readily available food in the field. But if the food is not readily available, you're required to give any animal food. You're to even do humidi rabbanon v'sugya mochichik divrei Ran. It's really like the Ran ain't davar muchra sharif Rambam cholkim, and therefore asarech al divrei Ran lo yifsid. If you're lenient like the Ran, you didn't lose out. Shiltei Giborim asks why feeding one's own doves in a birdhouse or attic is prohibited. Explains that even the owner of these birds is not responsible for their sustenance, since they can easily find food elsewhere. Right? Why birds live in your house? Why aren't you responsible for them? They go fly around. So therefore, the Mishnah Bura, based on the Shiltei Giborim, writes that the prohibition on feeding doves applies even to one's own doves, since they are able to find food in the field. The Eshel Avram of Buchach, because there's a commentary on the Magen Avram, also written by the Pri Megadim, that's also called Eshel Avram, which was an earlier commentary. Buchach is in Galicia, I think, so he was a Galicianer. That if one already has leftover food to dispose of, he may be permitted to throw in front of animals. Mikol makom, if you're going to throw away food, anyways, you might as well throw it to the animals. Certainly, if you're going to throw it anyways there. Rav Yitzchak Yosef rules the same way. Provides an example of shaking out crumbs from a tablecloth in an area where the birds will eat them. Muter l'nayr samape b'mirpeset. This is also, I think this whole thing is chazara, because I remember learning this. Maybe I prepared it. I don't know. You were not here. You were in Israel. So you don't remember. Okay. Muter l'nayr samape b'mirpeset. You can go out to the patio and shake off your tablecloth with crumbs. Or b'chotzer habayis, b'mokom sheish iruv, or if there's an eruv. Avshat ziporim yavo achar kach v'yochlu mapiruim, even though the birds are going to eat from it. Even if normally he shakes out his tablecloth somewhere else, you can go and dafka do it there. The sof. Ain't a torah. It's not a big tircha. He's doing it to clean his tablecloth. It's not primarily to feed the animals. The Bir Halacha quotes the Eliyah Rabbah, who implies that one may feed only one's own animal, but not animals owned by another person. But the Bir Halacha himself concludes that this differentiation is not correct. And you can feed animals that can't survive by finding their own food. You can, even if they're not your own. Yoine Baisios, Kozemar Kishem Shalom, Kemulchach Meliyah Rabbah. The heter to feed the birds in your house, the Eliyah Rabbah seemed to say that it had to be your own birds. However, Lanias Daiti, the Bir Halacha says in his humble opinion, Ein ze borer, the Kivan Shem Shal Yisrael, as long as the animals are owned by Jews, Veina Mochlim Mehefker, and they don't eat from Hefker to steal food, Kiechi the Mutter Lebalei Lachilem Zoynois. Just like it's proper for the owner to prepare food for them so that they wouldn't go and eat in somebody else's backyard and steal, somebody else can do it as well. So according to the Bir Halacha, one would be permitted to feed someone else's pet, even though it doesn't belong to him. Since the pet is dependent in general on humans for its sustenance. The Gemara quoted above continues with an Agadic exposition regarding the sustenance required by a dog, as well as a conclusion that it's proper to feed dogs in a field. Darash Rav Yoina Piskal Debein Yisrael Ma'adir Siv Yodea Tzadik Din Dalim. The tzaddik knows the life of the poor. Yodea Kadosh Baruch Hu Bekelev Shmazos of Moatim. Kadosh Baruch Hu knows that the dog is always hungry. He doesn't have a lot of food. Lefichach Shoyach Chiloso B'Meav Shloshes Yomim. He did a toiva to the dog that the food lasts in the dog's stomach for 3 days. Amrav Amnuna Shmamino Arachara lemishta umtza lekalba, that it's proper to throw meat in front of a dog. Kama honor of Mary, meshech udne, an ear, v'chutra abasrei. It should be struck with a stick, so the dog shouldn't get used to being fed by the person. Hanimili bedibra. That's when you're in the field. Aval b'mosalo. Don't give meat to a dog. The asila misrach. It'll get spoiled. And not only that, the dog will follow the guy around. The Mogen Avram writes that based on this Gemara, one may feed even an ownerless dog on Shabbos, since it's proper to provide sustenance for such a dog. The Mishnah Berurah quotes this leniency, but adds that one should not feed a dangerous dog. So you can feed lifnei kelev, feed a kelev she'ena megadla b'veiso, mutter, mitzavik tzat. Gam ken litalam, you have a little bit of a mitzvah to feed them. Moshe Chazal, shechaz HaKadosh Baruch Hu alav. Lefish mezasov muatim. If Kadosh Baruch Hu cares about the dogs, we should care about it. It prevents the digestion of the food for 3 days. If it's a rabid dog, you're not allowed to raise such a wild animal. The Shmir Shabbos Kolchasos says, Kobal Chaim Shein Motzele Mazon, an animal that can't find its own food, V'hu Ra'ev, it's hungry. Mutar Litein Lifon of Mazon Gam b'Shabbos v'Yontiv. You can feed it on Shabbos and Yontiv. Ki Arei Kosav Rachma V'Kol Masav. Hashem is merciful. You have to be merciful. Mahu Rachu Matarach. V'chein Mutar Lo Teit Mazon Lifnei HaKelev. Gam Im Ein Mezos of Adam. Even if the dog's not yours, you can feed a dog. You can even put food in the mouths of animals. But not move it. What about feeding fish? One who keeps fish at home is responsible for their sustenance. And as such, he must feed them on Shabbos. The Shmir Shabbos Kolchasos summarizes the halach of an aquarium. Aquarium, sheyesh bo dogim v'tzimchei mayim, that has fish and fish plants, not water plants. Asur lachlif esmeim on Shabbos. Don't change the water on Shabbos. Achim tzarech lo yosif mayim b'chol yom. If you have to add some water every day, mutter lo yosif gam b'Shabbos. You can add on Shabbos. Ukedin Shabbos kachadin gam b'yontiv. Same thing on Yontiv. These fish, they can't get food on their own. They rely on you. Without adding water, they can die. Like feeding them. And you can do it Shabbos in Yom. Can you move the aquarium? We're worried about Mukezeh. If a fish jumped out of the fish tank on Shabbos, if you think it can still stay alive if you return it, otherwise it's painful for the fish. Some prohibit this. The Ktosach Choshen considers the aquarium to be an adornment, permits moving it. Rav Moshe rules stringently. Since fish are muktzah, the aquarium is a basis l'davar aser. Now, there's a general dispute quoted by the Mishnah Berurah regarding whether moving muktzah is permitted in order to prevent animals from suffering. The Gemara in Shabbos explicitly permits violating the prohibition of muktzah, or against making an item unsuitable for use, right? Being mevatel kli mechono, in order to prevent animals from suffering. But the Achronim dispute whether the same leniency applies to Mukezeh when necessary. If one of the fish died, muchalas, you can remove it. Otherwise, the other fish will die. And particularly if there's financial loss. And as long as you don't choose, because you might violate borer. Dogim sheshritzu bakverium. If the fish were born in the aquarium, you can't remove the smaller fish that have just been, laid to prevent the bigger fish from eating it. You can't remove it. But you could tell a non-Jew to move the small fish to a different place. Now, what about Shabbos Shira? The Shabbos that we read Parshas Beshalach, the Shabbos Shira. Some of the custom to leave grains of wheat for birds on that Shabbos. The Magen Avram criticized that, as one is not responsible for the sustenance of birds. Wild birds on the outside, they don't rely on you. So what are you feeding them for? However, the Aruch HaShulchan defended the practice by arguing that the motivation for placing the wheat is not for the birds, but for ourselves, in order to remember the joy at the splitting of the sea. He also quotes Tosas Shabbos, who suggests that placing wheat out for the birds is permitted, as this is considered a mitzvah. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, Yesh Misramim al Masham Hanig b'Shabbos Shira Ligzroch Chitin Lifnei Ha'oifos. People would complain about this custom to throw wheat to birds. Very aim is a nice of a we don't take care of their food needs. He quotes the Magen Avram. Aval nirali the minhag Yisrael Torah. If a custom of Jews develop, there must be a source to it. Enano torchim b'shvilam, ela b'shvilenu. We're doing this to sort of celebrate. The margla b'pi ha'amon sha'oifes amru shir hayam. That the birds also sang shir. We sort of return the favor. The whole point of doing this is to remember the happiness we had. So it's not a problem. The Yeshmish Shekosov Kivin, the Kavanas L'Shem Mitzvah Mutter. The Shmir Shabbos rules stringently, but like the Magen Avram. Lo Yafa Oisim Eil Shemafazim Gargire Chitin or Sheri Pashtida Kogol Litzipor B'Shabbos Shira. Rav Ovadia Yosef writes that one who follows that custom can rely on it. Yesh Noagim B'Shabbos Shira Lizro Chitin B'Chatzeros V'Marpepesos. They throw chitin in the courtyards and in the patios, so that the birds will come. Those who still have the practice, I think this was a European minhag. I remember learning the halacha, in elementary school, we learned this halacha, but I don't recall people actually doing it, going to their backyard on Shabbos Shira. Did you have that practice? Does anybody here on the call have that personal practice? Maybe you saw it on the Lower East Side, Yaakov. But maybe
I definitely, my late wife used to do that, put out for the birds on Shabbos Shira. Yep. Yeah.
So it's an old minute. The Tzitz Eliezer defends those who uphold the custom, quotes additional reasons. Uvisfoin is karim otamim. Other reasons are nach zachitim. Imishum shavos ochluma. Shabbos min mechachan. There are Hasidic sources that say that Dosan Aviram, who made trouble for Moshe, attempted to mock Moshe's statement that no man would fall on Shabbos by placing man outside on Friday night. But the birds ate the man before the rest of the people discovered it. so they didn't find it. So since the birds prevented a Chilul Hashem, we feed the birds on Shabbos Shir. And we read Parshas Amon, which goes along with that. It's to remind ourselves that when Klal Yisrael took us out of Mitzrayim, he provided food for us without hassle. Like birds that can find, food everywhere. So it's like a remez. Let's conclude with a machshava. We've learned the past two shirim about allowing one's animals to rest on Shabbos, in addition to various halachos related to interacting with pets and other animals on Shabbos. Why does the Torah insist that not only humans but also animals refrain from malach on Shabbos? Rav Asher Meir suggests two reasons for the mitzvah. Due to our inherent connection with our possessions and empathy of our animals, the restriction of our personal activities applies to them as well. Releasing our animals from performing labor for us is a fitting expression of appreciation for their assistance during the week. The Torah repeatedly instructs us to keep Shabbos, not only for ourselves, but also for our beasts. In the Ten Commandments, we are commanded to refrain from work together with our beasts. In addition, the Torah commands us to refrain from work in order to give rest to our beasts. Our sages infer that there are two distinct laws involved. One is the prohibition of mechamer, driving any beast to do work. The other is a positive obligation to give rest to our own animals by preventing them from doing malach on Shabbos. But this latter restriction is for the purpose of letting the beast rest. We shouldn't prevent the animal from doing things for its own enjoyment, like grazing, which is technically considered gathering on Shabbos. It's easy to understand why we may not drive beasts to do work on Shabbos. Driving beasts is one of the most important ways work is done during the week, particularly in ancient times. And sometimes who does work this way is not exactly resting from labor, but we need to explain why we must give rest to our animals. Even non-Jewish people are not required to keep Shabbos. Why should animals have to do so? So we can understand this prohibition on several levels. We mentioned that this prohibition applies only to animals we own. We have an intimate connection with our possessions, which can be considered an extension of ourselves. The sense of connection to our possessions is even greater with our animals, with whom we share a certain empathy. This empathy is beyond the many laws that command us to act humanely towards animals. This empathy is so great that the animal of a tzaddik absorbs some of its master's qualities, so much so that the Chazal say that God does not bring about a mishap to the beasts of a tzaddik. There's a famous story of a cow that became so accustomed to resting on Shabbos that even when she was sold to a non-Jew, she refused to do any work on Shabbos. We know the animal of Pinchas ben Yair, would be very careful what he ate. Finally, it's natural to feel a certain sense of gratitude towards our animals, which help us in many ways. Whether they provide us with work like a draft animal, they provide us with food or clothing from farm animals, or with companionship and loyalty like pets. Expression of Hakar Satov is an overarching Torah value. And giving rest to our animals on Shabbos is a Hakar Satov. So this obligation to rest our animals demonstrates that the ideal Shabbos is not experienced merely in personal withdrawal from specific forbidden activities, while awash in an environment of the week's hustle and bustle. As an interruption of the natural cycle of physical creation and labor, we must strive to escape on Shabbos to an experience which stands out from that of the rest of the week in all its respects. Thereby, releasing our animals from the cycle of the work week is one aspect of this idealized whole. May we merit to reach Shabbos, which is truly fully elevated and elevating. Okay. We will pick up next week and start Hilchos Mukezeh on page 215. Hilchos Mukezeh will extend to the next volume as well, to volume 21. I'll have to order. Did I give out volume? Remind me. Do people have volume 21 or no? No,
I
we
think
volume 22. I'll
22
get
you gave
volume,
it.
I'll get volume 21. They'll send it to me.
Okay.
Right. Anybody who's around town is invited to Kiddush at Yavna this Shabbos. Susie and I, or Susie's giving it in honor of my birthday. So she wanted me to invite everyone, whoever's around.
Yeah.
Have a
Bye.
good,
Thank you.
Thank you.
have a
Be
good
well.
week,
Kol-
everybody.
sure. Okay.